Do you remember what a shepherd is? A shepherd is someone who takes care of sheep. The shepherd knows each lamb that is his. Even if he has 100 different lambs, he knows each one in a special way. He knows if even one lamb is missing. A shepherd will even name each little lamb because a shepherd loves his sheep so much. The sheep also learn to love and obey the shepherd. In Bible days, shepherds were often young boys. There was a young boy named David who took care of his father's sheep. David was an excellent shepherd. He listened to his father and learned how to take care of the sheep. Sometimes, if they seemed to be upset or if one of them had come close to having an accident that day, David would sing to them. When David sang, the sheep would calm down and rest quietly again. And David would sing most often at night under the stars when everything was quiet and peaceful. The sheep had learned the voice of their shepherd. When he was older, David was given a harp. He learned to play this while he sang. A harp is something like a violin, except that you pluck the strings quickly with your fingers instead of using a bow across the strings. The sheep loved to hear David sing and play his harp. David often did not go home for days and days, but lived on the hillside with his sheep. David was also very brave because sometimes he had to protect the sheep from attacks by wild animals. Most of the time, David used his slingshot to scare away wild animals and keep them from his sheep. But many times, large wild animals would come to the hillside that were too big for a slingshot to scare away. One time, a lion tried to attack one of the lambs, and when David heard the lamb cry out, he ran quickly to see what was happening, and as soon as he saw the lion, he killed it. David did not worry about being brave. He just did what had to be done. But we know how brave David really was because he killed a lion. Another time, when David was watching his sheep, a bear came near, and David knew that bears were even meaner than lions and wolves. The bear was very strong. He stood on his hind legs and attacked David. Somehow, David killed the bear. David would not let anything hurt his sheep. When something bad happened to one of the sheep, David would take care of the animals or care for an injury that one of the sheep had suffered. Then he would sit down with his harp and sing to quiet the sheep once again. Later, when David was grown, he wrote many of the Psalms in the Bible. This is one of the Psalms David wrote. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd. Maybe he thought of part of it while he was singing to his sheep. God was teaching David to have great courage. Do you remember who Samuel was? Last week we learned about Samuel. Well, when Samuel grew up, he stayed close to God and served him well. Samuel loved God very much. During Samuel's life, God gave the people their first king. The king's name was Saul. And at first, Saul loved and served God. But soon he went on his very own way, and he no longer listened to God. And then God told Samuel that a new king would be chosen. There was a man named Jesse. Jesse lived in the town of Bethlehem, and Jesse had 8 sons. The name of Jesse's youngest son was David. David was a shepherd boy like we just talked about. He spent most of the time in the hills with his father's sheep. He loved to watch over the sheep and take care of them for his father. Well, God sent Samuel to Jesse's home to find the new king. David was still a young boy, and when Samuel came, David was out in the fields with his sheep. Samuel told Jesse that one of his sons would be the next king. Jesse brought out all of his sons that were home, and Samuel talked to each of them. But soon he knew that God had not chosen any of these sons. And then he asked Jesse, "Do you have another son?" Jesse was surprised because David was so young. "Yes," said Jesse, "but he's out in the fields caring for my sheep." Jesse went for David. When he came, Samuel knew at once that this was the one that God had chosen to be king. He would not become the king until he grew older, but surely that day would come. You see, boys and girls, God has a wonderful plan for your life. He already knows the wonderful things He wants you to do. This is one of God's greatest gifts for you. Plan now to grow up like David did. David loved God and obeyed God when he was young. He continued to love and obey God as he grew up. God planned a wonderful life for him, and God has planned a wonderful life for you too, if you continue to love and obey Him. This will be God's gift for you. So now I want you to look at this page. In your own words, what is Samuel telling Jesse here? You will write it in your own words. And what is Samuel telling David? What was God's plan for David? When he was young, what did God want him to do? And then later, when he became a man, what was God's plan for him? We'll be talking about this this week, that God has a plan for all of us.